the first line of just open questions and requesting a response from the chief. Chief, if you can identify yourself for the record, and whoever has joined you up front at the table, and then by all means, we'll go ahead and present the questions.
Good afternoon, Senator Frank Aguon. Good afternoon, Guam U.S. Committee, the Committee on Guam U.S. Military Relocation, Public Safety, and Judiciary. With me, of course, I have Lieutenant Andrew Kitagwa, who's the Operations Chief for Administrative Division. I have other members of the Guam Police Department, Bureau of Services, Admin, and Support Division that are coming here. And also, we'll have some individuals from Forensic Division also coming in here, so that if there's any questions on the progress report for FSD.
Thank you very much, Chief Rodalio. And as was stated, in terms of the line of questions that will be presented, I know that the committee had initially requested a copy of your bi-weekly reports that you requested from your POC in regards to the Forensic Science Division. We have yet to receive the most recent current report, so if we can just inquire as to the status of the most current report and the status of the activities with the Forensic Science Division, which is inclusive of the crime lab and the evidence facility, please.
Well, right now our chief criminalist can probably get more into specifics when she comes here, but right now it's looking pretty good. Recently, from the past couple of weeks, I've been meeting with BBMR, and what we've done right now so far, and what's looking good right now, the crime lab, is the chiller that cools the entire crime lab right now. One of the chillers has been repaired and it's fixed now, so the entire crime lab has been cooled down in terms of for the staff members up there to be doing the work. There's still a lot more work that needs to be done in terms of other work requests that we've submitted, and I think you have copies of them on mold remediation, and taking a look at the structure and looking at also putting in backup, such as split airs that already some of those work were plus. GSA from the Department of Administration has been doing a great job working together with us, together with BBMR, in terms of making sure that we use the funding, and like to thank the judiciary too, because we're using a lot of that monies in terms of from the judiciary to get the crime lab up to speed in terms of the chiller now working, and them ballistics examinations are being done now. They can get back into doing drug analysis, and they can be fully operational. In terms of the evidence control section, we got some funding from our police services fund. We have two project groups working. One is on the long-term reconstruction of the long-term construction of an evidence control facility. I think it was announced that we received the funding from the Department of Interior. So that's at least looking good in the long term. Short term, Lieutenant Andrew and the administrative staff, together with our support division, have been scouting. They'll be shortly, sooner or later, putting out an RFP for a lease. That's a short-term position, is to lease an area for our evidence control section. And there are some reports that I provided in terms of the concerns there, because of course the Attorney General's office came over and we invited them to take a tour of the evidence control section, and there's a lot of things that need to be done in terms of evidence and properties to be disposed of and purged, so we're lightening our load at evidence and control section. That's basically it right now for the FSD issues right now.
So in regards to, before I open up to the rest of the senators, just so that there's a good understanding of your ongoing efforts, Chief, and I certainly appreciate the regular feedback in regards to the activities taking place. So the crime lab, right now you have the singular chiller that is operational. You also have two split ACs that have been installed or are in the process of being installed.
They'll be in the process. We already have the funding identified for it, and the project request. GSA is working so that vendor will come over and install split air conditionings in the admin area, and those are just backup because the entire lab right now is being cooled by the chiller that's working now.
Okay,
and it's expected that chiller that's working, provided maintenance is done, and it could last probably over a year and a half to 2 years. So your
split AC is still pending within the next couple of weeks or within the next 30 days
That's correct.
for installation.
Yeah.
Now, your actual operation for the lab, aside from the administrative personnel, is that still proceeding in terms of acquiring support from the University of Guam as well as Guam Community College?
Well, now that because the entire lab is cooled now, we still just want to be in the safe side again to do another air quality testing again, because now it's been a while since that whole crime lab got, with the chiller working. So they're going to do another air quality test just to be in the safe side again. And then, so in the meantime, our crime lab criminalists, according to the information I was given, have been accommodated by using the Marine lab for their drug analysis testing. But they'll move back up to the crime lab if that air quality testing, is positive in its results.
Okay, and then moving on to the evidence facility, what's the amount that you were able to successfully acquire from?
I think from Department of Interior is roughly about $1.2 million from Department of Interior for construction of an evidence control facility. For the lease, we've been able to identify funds to lease, and I think we're looking at with an RP coming up. It could be about $60,000 for the rest of this fiscal year, and then we'll look at put in some more to continue for another fiscal year again, for the next fiscal year, to continue the lease while we're looking at constructing the evidence control facility.
So just as it applies to the long-term fix or establishment of a facility for the evidence section, if there's any need for legislation, then the committee extends its support to the department in terms of either identifying the property or working in conjunction with anything else that may be required. Let me go ahead and open the line of questions to the senators. Vice Speaker Cruz, you had a question?
Did we finally get a mechanical engineer to come in to review the air conditioning system?
Excuse me, I didn't hear you, Vice Speaker.
Did we finally get a mechanical engineer to come in and review the situation with the air conditioner?
No, but that is going to be one of the plans too, especially when it comes down to doing that assessment, especially with the air quality and looking at that interior. That was a recommendation that we're certainly going to be moving on, and I think Monica can probably shed light on that in terms of how we're going to work together with DOA and BB-BAR on a GG1 to be looking at a position description on that.
With regard to the mechanical engineer, because you're aware there are the HVAC system is just one part of the issues that we're dealing with the laboratory. So we are in the process of talking to the original contractors and the designer to see if they can give us an estimate on how much it would cost to have a consultant brought on board. That way we can request from the chief of police funding support to bring a consultant on, and they will bring on whoever specialists or subject matter experts that we need to look at the entire laboratory system to make sure that everything, not just the HVAC system, but all the other systems that are integrated in the lab for the laboratory to function properly is addressed. That way we're not doing things piecemeal or putting out fires here and there. We just want to look at the total problem and then get a final solution.
And when will that be done?
Well, we had a meeting last week with RIM Architects, and we are going to continue meeting this week, and also with the Department of Public Works. We're trying to touch base with them to see if they can come on board with us as well. So right now we're still in the development phase of just trying to see. The architects will come to see generally what the issues are with the laboratory so that they can give us an estimate. So that's still in the planning phase.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, if you could include this as in part of their bi-weekly reports on status.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Speaker. I believe, Chief, that any and all activities on your bi-weekly report, actually it's a bi-weekly report to your desk, to yourself, that you put in as part of your requirement on the assignment of Captain Santos as the POC for the Forensic Science Division. And part of that requirement is a bi-weekly report of all the activities. So please, per Vice Speaker Cruz, the request is to also include this particular discussion and ongoing activities. So I would anticipate, Mr. Vice Speaker, that would be added to the report. So Chief, if we can get your assistance on that. Any other questions or comments? Senator Underwood?
Monica, just as a matter of clarification, so you're looking at getting a consultant who specializes in crime labs and bring them in to do an overall assessment of the condition?
Yeah, we don't have a consultant on island that specializes specifically with crime laboratories, but we do have um, the architects who have access to people who have a general idea of the different type of laboratory systems that can be implemented both in laboratory or hospital or just administrative environment. So because I don't have the background or the expertise, I think this was the best route to go, was to go, at the suggestion of the court, go back to the original designers and ask their assistance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. Any questions, Senators? Senator Tamara?
Chief, maybe you can just clarify, when the Vice Speaker asked if a mechanical engineer had been brought on board to, take a look at your systems, and you mentioned something about a GG1.
Yeah.
Can you clarify that?
We've discussed this, and I know the crime lab FSD personnel says they don't have the expertise, and I know it was suggested in the previous oversight hearing, you need someone who has that kind of background, who could be like the manager of the crime lab, actually a manager of the crime lab, who knows that structural, and the kind of structural engineering and the kind of things that are taking place, that it's very complex in terms of the crime lab, not only its cooling system, the entire structure and everything. And, and they're inundated with trying to second guess and get experts out there. So as on the discussion, we looked at what kind of position description we should get. Is it a mechanical engineer we want, or is it actually a manager, a building manager, a facilities manager? And right now, the closest agency that we have in giving us advice in terms of what's happening at the crime lab is Department of Public Works, who stand ready, Glenn Leonguerel, to offer some of that assistance. Together with sometimes, and I like to thank sometimes the Air Force Reserve, or I believe, or the Air National Guard, I think, or something that the people that are related to engineering and designs.
Okay. I guess, I thought I heard what you said,
Yeah.
but I was in my mind, I was thinking that you were going to go out maybe for an RFP for consulting services, a mechanical engineer basically on an indefinite quantity basis, and you basically call them in as you need it, but you don't need an engineer there 24/7.
That's right.
So, if you were looking at the GG1 route, you would, I don't know that you can pay a mechanical engineer at the classified rate as opposed to just putting out an RFP. So I was really surprised by that answer.
Yeah, it was really a facilities manager, someone who, on their background, when they,
Doesn't the
there's a
department
position
have a
description.
facilities manager? Doesn't the department itself have a facilities manager overall right now?
No, we actually, that's the a role that the police lieutenant or the police captains, the ones who hold the division chief or the the operations chief, actually that's what their roles and their functions when they're taking care of their shop. They're actually the building facilities manager for their shops. So but it's a different animal when you're talking about the forensic lab. So
I understand. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Tamara. Chief, just on the Forensic Science Division, I know that your last biweekly report was due on your desk Wednesday of last week, so please, if I can, on behalf of the committee, request a copy of that.
Okay, Senator.
Thank you very much. No further questions on the Forensic Science Division. Chief, the next item on the agenda is a follow-up on the status of the remaining balance of the law enforcement retro payments to GPD officers as it pertains to the 40% raise for law enforcement. Can we get a status report on that, please?
I'm sure there's going to be members of BBMR or Department of Administration that may be in attendance here. But I just wanted to announce that, and I know it's being announced already 1:30 this afternoon, that there's $6.4 million that will be paid out to law enforcement. Of that amount, about $2 million is for the Guam Police Department. The checks are being processed and they should all be released this week. And as I told, the committee on the oversight hearings that the reconciliation, was completed by the end of April. So these payments are actually being, the checks are actually being processed right now. And I'd like to thank again Governor Calvo, for his support for all of, not just the Guam Police Department, for all law enforcement, and working to make sure that all the police officers, including me, I have a retro check, I believe, that's there to include me, but really I'll wait until the last Guam police officer is paid before I'll get my retro check. And I just believe that it's good news now that that law enforcement obligation is going to be met this week.
Chief, thank you very much. I mean, granted, it's 4 or 5 days after the deadline that you had shared with the committee members, but it's excellent news to hear that not only has your office been collaborating with the front office in terms of BBMR and DOA, working to identify the $6.4 million that's due. Once the checks are received by our law enforcement community, then obviously this is an obligation that no longer will affect not only GPD officers but also our law enforcement community. So I want to thank you, and granted it's been an issue that we've brought to the table on a monthly basis, but it's definitely good news on behalf of the law enforcement community that Governor Calvo has conceded to working with you and the rest of the law enforcement community in terms of not only identifying the resources but paying it out hopefully by the end of the week. So I appreciate your effort in this regard.
Great,
Any statements or comments from members of the committee? Vice Speaker Cruz.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I with the comment being made that trying to find the resources for it, I think last week you pointed out to the governor that there was a provision in the budget that we passed to address that. And in fact, in his September 5th letter, 2014, to the Speaker announcing that he had signed the budget law, he wanted to thank us for something. Is thank you for funding the programs we pushed for. Madam Speaker, I'm particularly grateful for the legislature's approval of the programs we pushed for together. And number 2 on that list was, thank you for authorizing me to pay law enforcement officers their retroactive salary. And in the budget, the legislature had specifically set aside $10 million in Section 22 for it. So I just wanted to make it clear that we were part of this entire process and that we had identified and designated the $10 million of the budget last August for this payment, and that the delay was not the legislature's.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Speaker. Any other questions or comments in regards to this particular question? Thank you again, Chief, for making the rest of the law enforcement community happy. Senator Nicholas?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify, Chief, so we have $6.4 million for the law enforcement, $2 million to GPD. Does that satisfy the total outstanding 40% payment owed to the police officers?
Just in response, if I may, Chief, because I know indirectly we were provided a $6.4 million figure. So that's all inclusive of specialty pay. So that's why I mentioned that this obligation would address and get this debt off the books. But please, Chief, if you can also clarify.
I believe, that's the information that this closes the books on the debt.
Okay, so we're all done.
We're all done.
Okay, that's good news for me. One other question I had, and I don't know, Mr. Chair, if we're going to cover this in the next item, but I did receive a question about the civilian volunteer police reservists and their stipends that have not been paid since November, I was told. Are we also going to be including them in the $6.4 million?
No, Senator, but I got some good news. By next week, we're working with BBMR. We've identified funding and from our police services operations funds, and there'll be about $14,750. Been given that total figure that will be paid out for reserve stipends that will cover from November, December, and January. The February, March, those periods. The commanding officer who's sitting in the back of the reserve command has some turned in, but they haven't been completed and they're by their supervisors to acknowledge they worked those hours to be compensated. Once those are completed, we're going to hurry up and process them in. So those months of February, March, and up to its current can be taken care of because we have the funds for it already to pay every single reserve officer who's owed the money up to this month.
Okay, so everything that's been reconciled, we are going to be paying by next week?
Yes.
And
by
then
next
as soon as the rest are reconciled, the funds will be available to pay out those.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Nicholas. And then moving on to the third item on the agenda, Chief, follow-up on deliverables requested from the oversight hearing on Friday, April 17th. And obviously, the first line of question was just responded by yourself. Do you have a timeline when these police reserves will be paid? And please provide a date. So the $14,750 is anticipated to be paid to our reserves who have an outstanding obligation that's due to them through the month of January. So thank you very much for sharing that information with the committee. The second question is, how will GPD improve the process with the police reserves so that they can receive timely payment? Have you responded also?
And again, I've elaborated on that a little bit,
okay.
that the commanding officer of the Volunteer Service Command has those timesheets. Some of them aren't signed by their supervisors, to acknowledge. We use the same process as we do with timesheets for individuals who come in and they time in.
Okay.
The commanding officer of the Volunteer Service Command will be submitting to me, because I give them a deadline by the end of this week to have all that reconciled. But to give a particular proposal, does it need to be tweaked in terms of why some reserve officers aren't making the effort to get their timesheet signed? And again, I speculated there are some reasons. Some reserve officers, again, are not concerned about getting paid. They just come in and volunteer, and even though they pass that 42 hours, they have another full-time job, and they just don't see the importance of getting it documented. But I have Lieutenant Art Polino who can probably elaborate on further on the process of how they time in and get compensated.
Thank you, Chief. Lieutenant Polino?
Yes, what the chief said is absolutely correct, but there's an additional delay, and that delay is really rests with the civilian police reserves themselves. Upon assuming command just this year in January, I noticed that as I was doing a command assessment, their timesheets were not being filled out completely. These reserves will work for various commands. Some will work, let's say, 4 hours at Ditto Precinct. Some will work 8 hours in a special operation. So what it is we require these reserves to be, upon completing that assignment, to have their immediate supervisor sign that particular part that they had, to sign that particular portion, date and time that they had worked on. So the issue, and we're pushing this out to the reserves, that don't wait until the end of the week, don't wait until the end of the month to start looking for signatures. We're pushing out, have a copy of your timesheets, have the supervisor initial, date and sign, indicating, confirming that you have completed the task, sign it. Then at the end of the month, they bring that to our office, and their OIC, which is actually Sergeant Elizabeth, she signs that. Then she packages it and gives it to me. I check it for quality assurance, make sure the signatures are there. When the signatures are lacking, that delays it even further. We call it the reserves. Hey, get over here. It's your responsibility. I mentioned to Sergeant Liz that if certain reserves don't complete the signatures, we're going to pull their timesheets out and route the rest forward so we don't delay any further. We have timesheets that are sitting on my desk, a little bit from January, mostly from February. We have yet to receive the timesheets from March or even April. So again, with the very few staff personnel I have, we push this information out via the email. Granted, we can do a little bit better job in doing that, but it behooves the reserves, upon completing that hours that they had worked, get that document signed, and then transmit it to us immediately.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant Polino, for that particular response. Vice Speaker Cruz?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, if I could beg your indulgence to just go back to the retro.
Sure.
For a quick second.
Chief?
Chief, when the retro we paid with its $6.4 million, did we also pay retirement fund for their 30%?
I've been informed by BBMR this will include retirees also. They will be compensated as part of this retro.
No, I'm not talking about retirees.
Yeah.
I know that in the list that you sent us, that the retirees, that there were some retirees. I saw the previous chiefs on that list of getting retros. I'm talking about were the retirement fund contributions made on behalf of all of these employees so that they're current with their retirement fund contributions.
Let me go ahead and get back, get some of that information, just verify that,
All
just
right,
to make
so-
sure if there was any.
Mr. Chairman, if you could add that to your list of confirming whether or not retirement fund has been paid the 30%, and whether or not you were making net pay for these employees, or how is it being done?
I can go ahead and get verification on that.
All right,
Checking with my
so
family.
that can be included in the next report. Thank you. And on the police reserves, please, I know I was the most vocal one the last time, but please, these poor guys, I mean, the amounts that they're getting is a pittance. I mean, it's embarrassing. Please make sure that we can process it at the earliest possible date.
Okay. Thank you very much, Vice Speaker. Any other questions with regards to this? Actually, Chief, the third line of question was very similar in nature, so I'll just go ahead and skip it because it referred to the police reserves and the amount that is due to include January, February, March, and April. So I understand that already you reconciled February, so you're looking at March and April to current. The additional question, and just for your information, Senators, these lines of questions were provided by the Chief, and so he's had ample time to be able to review it and provide the appropriate response. Fourth question is, please provide the exact number of officers and the exact amount of money that we should set aside in the budget for police reserve. This specific purpose refers directly to a suggestion that perhaps in future budgets that the amounts for the police reserve be set aside in the GPD budget. So, you have any comments or response to that, Chief?
Well, 100. We have 125 sworn civilian volunteer police reserve officers. If all 125 in one whole fiscal year worked 42 hours out of the week, out of the month, and we have to pay them their stipend for that entire fiscal year they were averaging, we would need to budget $372,000 to pay the entire 125 reservists for all coming in 42 hours out of the month. We would need the budget for that. And I remember, as I said the last oversight hearing, about 1/4, just like 25% of the reserves actually, it's always like maybe 30 to 40 of them, or 25 to 30 or 40, less than that, would actually claim the 42 hours and for the $250 stipend. So not all 125 do that. So, but that's just a figure that my ASO, acting ASO, and those guys came up with the figure of what would need to be budget if all 125 reservists work 42 hours out of the month.
Thank you, Chief, and I appreciate that number. And what we'll do is we'll continue to work with your office and track the active members, and perhaps be a bit more realistic in terms of setting aside such sum for the police reserve. The other question is, how much of the $6 million of the public safety vacancy pool did GPD ask BBMR to set aside to meet the demands of hiring new personnel?
I was given this figure that there was $1,913,203 taken out of the that we've pretty much communicated with BBMR in terms of our vacancy pool. I can actually have our former ASO, OV, now to come up here just to elaborate on that vacancy pool
Please,
information.
and if she can identify herself for the record and her capacity, please. Thank you, Chief.
Ovi Nauta, currently volunteer for GPD. I was the former ASO. With regards to the vacancy pool, on the budget law, we were given 1.9 million. And those were taken from the vacant positions from the staffing pattern on FY14. So that was the number that we're dealing with, that we dealt with regards to hiring. What we had, what we got out of the vacancy pool was we picked up 16 POTs because they were originally budgeted under the GPD cycle in fiscal year 2014. But because of the hiring process, there's so much delays. So they were in part of the vacancy pool What else we picked up was 4 reemployments. That will be a detention guard, 2 police officers. We also put in a GG1 for a records management officer, program coordinator 2, a personnel assistant, a lateral transfer admin assistant from Rev and Tax to GPD. We have a criminalist 2, property control officer, an automotive mechanic 2, automotive mechanic leader, and a detention facility guard, if I didn't mention that earlier. So
Yeah.
that's what we got out of the vacancy pool, out of the 1.9. And because of Public Law 33-01, we don't have the balance, so we can't use the vacancy pool anymore.
So right now you've exhausted, so far with your initial communication with BVMR, of the allocation of $1.913 million that you've already exhausted based on all the positions that you've outlined.
Yes.
The 16 POT officers, police officer training, 4 reemployments, GG1s for records management officer, PC2, admin assistant, criminalist 2, a property control officer, an auto mechanic 2, an auto mechanic leader, and a detention facility personnel.
Yes, and part of the reemployment was also a police officer trainee.
Yes, the 16 police officer.
Aside from the 16, a reemployment for a police officer trainee.
So how many reemployment?
Of the 4.
Yeah, okay.
Part of it is that.
Okay, got you. Vice Speaker Cruz?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, again, for the next report, can the breakdown for the total amounts for each one of these categories be provided so that, I mean, trying to get all the numbers down right now would be a little much, but in a written report, I'd like to see it over their signature, how much was spent for each one. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. That request, can we get a projected timeline? Because obviously, upon the conclusion of this oversight hearing, that would dictate when the next oversight hearing discussion will be. But if some of these reports, based on timelines, can be provided, a good example is the Forensic Science Division. If we get the biweekly report, then chances are we can push the dateline for another oversight a little further down to the right. So just FYI, but that's a request for the financial breakdown of the allocation of funding of the $1.9 million for these positions.
That can be provided either first thing in the morning. I have a running balance in coordination with BBMR, so I can provide that either at the end of this session or first thing in the morning.
Okay, so can we request that be provided to my office by close of business Wednesday?
Yes.
So at least you would have ample time and work with the front office on that.
Yes.
Okay? Okay, thank you very much. Vice Speaker Cruz, as soon as the committee receives it, we'll ensure that the committee members receive it. Okay, the next question is, I'm sorry, Senator McCready?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a question on the 1.9 million that you got from the vacancy pool. That funds 16 POTs, right? And then aside from the 16 that you mentioned, that funds the rest of them.
The 16 POTs were a part of the GPD police cycle that we were budgeted in 2014.
So that didn't come out of the 1.9?
Yes,
It
it
did.
did. It was included in the 1.9.
From the vacancy pool.
Now, all the other POTs that we're recruiting are other funding sources included. But we already fulfilled the 16 that was in the vacant position listing.
Okay, so now out of the vacancy pool, you mentioned that there's been a lot of delays. What kind of delays are you talking about?
We had what I was saying about the delays is when we were given in 2014, the delays of hiring these 16 was because of the recruitment process. So when the ending of the fiscal year, it was still in the staffing pattern as vacant, although we didn't get the funding. I mean, the funding was there, but the general funds, of course, we didn't have it. New fiscal year, we don't have the funds for it, but it was included in the staffing pattern. The GG1s were cleared, but we just didn't get enough time for the recruitment. So to announce the position, and even when the positions are open, we have to do the interview process. That takes a lengthy process for the interviews, depending on the number of applicants that we have to interview.
Now, is the 16 POTs, is that been a yearly number that we've hired every year? Do we just kind of piecemeal the hiring as the funding is available?
As the funding is available, the reason why we got 16 is because it was set aside in our budget, or 2014, 800,000 was set
Yes,
aside.
yes.
So that's how we came up to
With
16.
So 800,000 funds 16
Funded
POTs.
16 at the time, but because we did not implement yet the full 40%,
Okay.
so that's...
What is that number now? Do you have that number now?
No, I don't.
Okay. So maybe we can find, I guess, Vice Speaker Cruz asked if we can get the actual number of how much it costs to hire a police officer. Now, do we have a plan moving forward to, because you have 16 POTs, how many officers do you foresee leaving the department within the year?
That's not we don't have a definite...
But I mean, it's going to balance out, right? You're just basically going to replace most of the officers that you lose?
If it's general funds, that's based on funding.
Yeah.
If it's federally funded, of course, yes, the funds are still there. So if one leaves that position, then we still need to hire and fill that position, because the grant says you're authorized, for example, 14 positions.
Yes.
And if one leaves, we still have to make sure that we fund 14, because the feds gave us money for 14 positions.
So you have money for 14 positions, or is that just a number that you're throwing out?
In this case, the
Yes.
16,
Yes,
the
that's
money, the money was there in 2014.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, the GG1s were cleared, but again, the recruitment process was the delay. So it was in the staffing pattern, we carried it forward in 2015. So
So the threshold you have is federal money that
it's
you use to
different,
hire.
yeah, federal dollars. And for example, the COPS grant, the latest COPS grant we have is the 2014. We are only awarded for 5 positions.
Okay.
So even if we turn in an application asking for 15, so it's dependent upon the feds awarding the grant and how many we're able to fund.
So anything that subsidizes general fund money, federal funds, would be the general fund money. It'd be like a subsidy.
Yes, I can safely say yes, but I'll explain further that the COPS grant, they have to be employed, or we have to retain them for 3 years. We retain them after the 3rd year of the grant. So that is the requirement. Any position that is federally funded, with COPS though, it's a 3-year. They have to fulfill the 3-year requirement. Then the local has to pick them up.
And we apply for these grants every year.
Just about, yes. And right now, the 2015 COPS application will be open in mid-May. So we're hoping to put another application in.
For how many police officers do you think?
We don't know. We'll
Okay.
try to shoot for the stars. And if
Yeah.
they say we'll only give you 10, so we'll take the 10.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator McCready. Senator Blas?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Nauta, Ovi, you mentioned something about Public Law 33-01. What did that do?
It gave the governor transfer authority to take the balance of the vacancy pool to DEPCOR to meet the requirement of whatever the federal issue looking at DEPCOR.
Was there a plan of that prior to that to be able to use more of that money prior to the reauthorization of 3301?
I'm sorry?
Was there a plan to be able to use a portion of that funding?
Well, yeah, if we still had
Right.
the monies, then yes, we would continue to fill the vacant positions that's listed
Okay.
in the vacancy pool. But because there was, at that point, we were told by BBMR, we can't use it anymore because of the issues at DEPCOR, and they've identified the vacancy pool.
Okay. Then you also mentioned about the COPS grant, and that for next year or for this year, you've only been authorized 5 positions?
For the 2014, when
2014.
we submitted our application, I know I submitted it and I asked for about 15 positions. When we were finally awarded, it came down to only 5.
What was
It
your
is a-
2013 allocation on cops?
For cops, for 2013, we had 6.
6. And were you able to fill that?
Yes.
And so we're going to be able to fill the 5 too.
The 5, yes, we're waiting for the rest of the applicants to go through their interview or the background and psych eval. So then from there, the chief will make a final selection for whoever the eligibles are. And to include in that is the Compact Impact Funds. We have 20 positions awarded under that grant. So we have 2 funding sources we're trying to fulfill.
Okay, but is that funding source, is that primarily just for the recruitment? And how long does that, if you say you hire 5 officers today for 2014, what monies do we use to continue to employ them subsequent years?
The grant goes on for 3 years.
3 years.
Yes.
Okay, so for 3 years, for 2013, we brought on 6. For the next 2 years, then, we don't have to worry about their funding,
Correct.
but then we eventually got to pick up.
After the third, once each individual, we're looking at each individual, they
Right.
have to meet a 36 months employment.
Okay,
So once that is met, then we have to retain them through the general fund.
okay. And it does factor in as far as increase in pay,
It's all
Is it just-
factored in there.
it's all factored.
It has to be factored in there.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Blas. Vice Speaker Cruz?
All the numbers being testified to orally are confusing me. So, Mr. Chairman, if I can get it in writing, I think I'd like the entire breakdown. How many officers did we start with at the beginning of the fiscal year? The entire GPD. How many retired? How many came on as COPS grant recipients? How many came on as Compact Impact recipients? How many came on as vacancy pool recipients? Break them down, because I never heard the 5 and 6 before. I thought the COPS grant you had mentioned and testified to 2 weeks ago, Chief, was 16, and now it's 5. So if I can get it in writing so that I'm no longer confused.
We're going to add in also tourism attraction funds for 4 officers at 2-1,
Okay.
Precinct 2.
And so if I could just, Mr. Chairman, get it in writing, because this is starting to...
We have about 4 COPS grant ongoing right now. So the last one will be the 2014 that we're going to fulfill.
No, I understand that you have 4 grant years that you're working with, but I'm trying to get the number of officers and how many officers are being put on, and how, for this fiscal year, what do we start out with, and what are we going to be up to next month once we have everybody hired. So, all right. I mean, just a complete breakdown of every single person, how many retirees left, and how many you're bringing back on filling positions.
Okay.
Let's see. And Chief, when the 6.4, was that just 6.4 for GPD alone, or did that take into account the rest of the other agencies?
With the other agencies.
Oh, so we have 3.6 left over from the 10 million that we had set aside in the budget that we can try to figure out and see if we can yeah. No, but I mean, but the thing is that we did have in the breakdown in the budget for 13% for the judiciary for theirs, and so we'll try to figure out what's left over in that 10 million and see if we can increase the number of officers that you can pick up. All right? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Speaker. Just so that we clarify the request by the Vice Speaker, he's requesting a breakdown beginning on October 1st for this fiscal year, which is reflective of all the uniformed officers personnel that started this fiscal year, how many retirees through today, and then how many individuals have been recruited accordingly. If they were recruited in fiscal year 14, but you're utilizing the $1.9 million, then that has to be specified now, and to include the COPS grant as well as the TAF. Now, my question to you, Ovi, and to Chief, is how much time do you need to be able to compile this? I don't want to unexpectedly say provide it.
Mr. Chair, if I can ask, if to
Yeah,
qualify
I'll-
that as well, note that the breakdown is by rank as well.
Okay, that's
By rank.
okay. That's. Thank you very much, Senator Blas. If I can get a realistic timeline rather than the chair just imposing a timeline, and
This list I can provide by Friday.
okay, by close of business Friday. And
Yes.
senators, I will disseminate the information. Vice Speaker, you should receive it by, if not close of business Friday, then first thing Monday. Okay, any other questions with regards to the vacancy pool? If not, Chief, you're aware of the next question. How is GPD paying for Cycle 2 and Cycle 3 in June? And this is your additional recruitment.
I'm going to have Lieutenant Andrew Kitagua address that question. He's been working with an admin division in terms of the recruitment cycle.
Lieutenant
Recruitment
Kitagua.
cycles.
Thank you, Chief.
Good afternoon, everybody. We are currently funding the cycle. It's the 6th police officer trainee cycle ongoing right now. It's being funded through the apprenticeship program at the Guam Community College. The way the college works is if we have at least 13 POTs to train, they'll agree to a cohort and compress the training. If we don't have the number to start a cohort of trainees, they can still participate in the apprenticeship program. However, they'd be placed into a traditional semester, which could take anywhere up to 2 years if they're full-time students going to school as employees of the Guam Police Department. We were successful in putting the 5th police officer trainee cycle that graduated in October through the apprenticeship program, and they funded the books and all the other things that they would fund through any apprenticeship program that's available to the government agencies or participating non-government organizations. So it's a very, very good complement for us in order to get them educated. They take part in the curriculum that is given over at GCC, and they certify through that particular program.
So your ongoing cycle of 16 POTs, they're undergoing the apprenticeship program at GCC?
Yes.
Okay.
The 6 POT cycle.
When do you anticipate the next cycle?
We would anticipate the next cycle to begin sometime after October, which is the target date for this current cycle to be graduating.
So there's no additional cycle in June or July?
Not with the current
So it's
cycle.
a
They're
six-
still undergoing training, Senator. They won't be done until probably October timeframe.
Okay. No, I understand the existing cycle, their anticipated graduation timeline is September, October. So,
Right.
yeah. But what was previously shared was that you anticipate to pick up additional personnel and have additional cycles by the end of this fiscal year. That's why I'm asking you. So right now, Chief, the anticipation is that you will complete the ongoing cycle of 16 POTs, and then any additional cycle will commence in the next FY. Is that correct?
That's correct. I even mentioned the last oversight hearing that the list that we've been working off in terms of going off the list and the screening expires on the 1st of July. And we're anticipating as we try to get bodies for another cycle that we'll probably be having to do an announcement again for a POT announcement to get a little bit more of a generated list to use for recruitment.
So if we go with Vice Speaker Cruz's statement that if in fact there are additional resources in the fund that was provided specifically for the retro and provide that flexibility, are you able to expedite an additional cycle?
I can answer. We would be have to coordinate and correspond with GCC because the instructors are really being processed through GCC. They organize the schedule. They purchase the books through the apprenticeship program, if we were to buy the books, they would need about 3 months ahead of time to not only organize a schedule, but also to ensure that the editions of textbooks that we're using in our academy are current. And sometimes that takes some time. And when we're in the middle of a semester that's ongoing at GCC, there's other challenges as well. Their employees they're employed only for 9 months out of the year. So we use critical courses like first responder, criminal law, constitutional law, which can't be taught by anybody really in our department, as a as a benchmark for when a good cohort can begin based on their availability.
Then Chief, can I throw just a request that at least the preliminary discussions commence with GCC and see at the soonest when you can commence another cycle. At the soonest, at the earliest. I mean, if it's August, when in fact the semester commences, then that's before the conclusion of the fiscal year. If it's not until the next FY, then we'll work with.
And if I can add, what also an impact on in looking at how sometimes we won't have to have an individual go through a cycle. Recently, in the last Peace Officers and Standards Training Commission meeting, by unanimous vote, we voted to certify the police officer training orientation advanced training program. And what that is we've been encountering sometimes in a recruitment individuals who already have a completed certificate in criminal justice, a completed associate's degree in criminal justice, completed bachelor's degree in criminal justice. And if they go through an in-service training with GPD, like the police reserve cycle, that's about 32 weeks, or 16 weeks advanced police officer orientation training cycle, they don't have to go to the Guam Community College for their criminal justice certificate, because the Post Commission just certified that the training they went, in combination of the training they went with GPD, together with their degree, bachelor's degree, and CJ, associate's degree and CJ certificate, they don't have to return JCC for that criminal justice certificate. And that means we don't have to send them through an apprenticeship. We can actually, they already, the training they went through in the police reserve cycle of 32 weeks or 16 weeks advanced police officer training will already count. And all we're pretty much doing is,
and that was approved. That was approved by the Post.
That was approved by the Post Commission and certified the last Post Commission meeting we had last week.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Vice Speaker Cruz, you have a follow-up?
That's music to my ears, because we've had many discussions in my office between yourself, Dr. Okada, about trying to get these two groups together and not have your own separate training cycles. Yeah. So I'm glad to hear that. And if you can provide the chairman with a copy of that memorandum of understanding with the GCC to finally have them do the training, I would really be happy to see that, because I didn't understand that to be what was happening as late as today. I didn't realize that that's the way that things were being done. But if that's the way you're saying it's being done, I'm happy, because that's what I've been trying to push for 4 years when I first took over as your oversight chair 4 years ago. On a different question, you say you have 125 reserve officers.
Reserve officers.
Somebody's shaking his head, but I won't point it out. Whatever the number of reserve officers you have, what would prevent you from moving them, putting them on the list to be full-time police officers if they've done the 32 hours, they've done all the other things? I thought that was the reason for the police officer reserve, was these guys were kind of thinking that they put their foot in the door and they're there. You know, it's not like the guy in
I think some of the
Indiana that thought that he was just doing this just because he had nothing else to do.
And since that vote was done on the last Post Commission, there were several police reserve officers who are going to school at GCC, obtaining not only after they already completed 32 weeks of our reserve training, but they're going for their associate's degree in criminal justice. When they heard that we certified the advanced police officer training program and they can use the reserve academy as reciprocity, then it's now easier. DOA will have to now, Department of Administration will have to honor their certificates now, because they're recognizing them for not only completing a GPD in-service training, but also they have their associate's degree in criminal justice, and they don't have to go back to GCC and attend the Criminal Justice Academy for 3 credit hours of firearms or 3 credit hours of emergency vehicle.
Yeah, I mean, because it seemed to me that you had a ready pool of potentials. Why would you need to make any announcement? It would seem to be almost in-house that you could pick up whatever number that you needed from this 125 or whatever the number is supposed to be that's available.
Yes.
And so I'm happy to hear that, because I know that these men and women have devoted and volunteered countless hours in the hopes of at some point becoming full-time police officers. And I really do think that we owe them a debt of gratitude by giving them the right of first refusal, or the first opportunity to be able to apply for full-time positions within the department.
And I think, Vice Speaker, President Mariacata was very receptive. I think she knew that it didn't make any sense that a police reserve officer who serves and risks their lives, I picked them up and hired them as a police recruit. We're going to take their badge away from them and secure their firearms so that they have to go to the Guam Community College and go for the criminal justice certificate. That horse has left that barn already. And I think she knew that to get promoted in the Guam Police Department, you have to go back to school and take some more college credits. 15 to be a police officer 2, 30 to be a police officer 3, 45 to be a sergeant 1. So these reserves are ending up going back to college. It might not just be GCC. It might be at the University of Guam or any online university to get their education. We've emphasized that on them.
I'm not talking about their promotion. I'm talking about their employment as police officers. One. It would seem to me that they should be able to make that easy transition over.
Yes.
And anything that can be done to do that would really go a long way.
Just, Chief, are you aware that the police reserve can be pulled in as a pool to augment our men and women who are deployed? At least
yes,
for a time
yes, sir.
frame of 1 year.
I'm aware that there have been some police reserve officers actually that when the military member already exhausted
Yes.
the military leave, that the challenge now is that they're looked at by DOA and look at what certificate they had. The problem we've had is Department of Administration doesn't recognize that certificate.
Chief, the one thing, the law doesn't recognize it as part of a recruitment process.
Yeah.
It's part of a tool that's available to the chief's office and to GPD. That if in fact several individuals, we anticipate a deployment of National Guard members at the latter part of this year.
Yeah.
If 5 individuals were to deploy, you could use the tool by law that says these police reserves, you can identify 5 individuals that would automatically step into a full-time status for a time frame of not more than 1 year. So
We just had that problem, but now with this post-commission development and progress made, now there isn't going to be, now the path has been blazed now for Department of Administration to work together with our department. And now it actually opens up the pool for other law enforcement agencies, the airport police, the Port Authority police, customs, and court. The other post members actually that voted along to support my motion on that post-commission meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. Chief, follow-on questions. So I take it, just for clarification purposes, Lieutenant Kittiwah, that at this point in time, there's no projected additional cycle for the balance of the calendar fiscal year until the conclusion of the ongoing cycle.
Right, and that was already discussed with GCC, and they require a 3-month advance notice so that they can organize a schedule, purchase the books, and accept us in. And they want the recruits by name. They want them by name, not just a number. They want names so that they can register them and do all the appropriate things necessary for either their apprenticeship program, or if we were going to pay for a cohort outright and not use the apprenticeship program, it's the same standard that they're.
So the Chair of Appropriations says he's identified $1.5 million for a new police cycle. Would you be able to communicate with GCC so that one commences within 3 months, 90 days off?
Right, and we also look at the amount students in a class.
Yeah.
So if we have 25, the GCC will only accept 25. Otherwise, you would need to get an override. Like some of us know, we go to college, we get an override, so we can sit in a class of more than 25 students. So, I guess the rate of absorption or whatever academic standards that they have to have in a classroom only limits us to about 25 a class. So we've been pushing GCC to accept more than 25, but they set a limit on the number, and they want to make sure that these students are learning and they're absorbing at a much higher rate, because we're doing 8-month cycles rather than a full 2 years, a traditional semester, 45 hours a semester for each class. So it's really compressed, and it requires a lot of attention for the POTs, much more so now because we have a lot higher standard for our recruits going into our schools.
So, Chief, if I can just once again ask if by any chance from your office, if you can communicate with GCC, and if by any chance funding could conceivably be identified and authorized if a cycle could commence any or sooner than October 1st, the beginning of the next FY. Because obviously the school year begins in August, so chances are, based on the coordination, that there could conceivably be a cycle, but we have to go through, our GPD has to go through the entire recruitment. So I understand that that's another challenge in and of itself. Okay, the next question, final question, which is broken down into two different parts, is what is the plan for GPD to fill vacancies so the overtime is controlled? Obviously, we discuss your recruiting. What is GPD's plan to pay for the overtime overage for fiscal year 15 without compromising operations and public safety?
Well, if I can have Ovi Nata
Please.
again come over here to elaborate on some of the the funding that we have right now to pay overtime and what we're at.
Senators, right now we're going to be fully expending what was originally appropriated to GPD. There's $35,000 left in the regular appropriations, so that will be expended by one more pay period that we're going to pay out, I think, April. Then from there, we're going to start utilizing the $1.5 million that was authorized to GPD from the SAR. So that would take care for, I guess, from May to September. So we have about 10 pay periods coming up.
So you're anticipating being able to identify working with the front office, being able to
We have
identify
the
$1.5 million?
already. The account's already been established.
Okay.
Whatever monies that are released is there for GPD's use. But we want to fully expend whatever we have on the regular appropriation, which is only $35,000, like I said. So that will be enough to cover for one more pay period, as I was told by our payroll. And then from there, we'll start utilizing the 1.5 SAR OT for 2015.
So do you anticipate 1.5 expending that full amount? Because that would tell me that the overtime allocation and expenditure plan for this fiscal year would be about 2.5, and that's the purpose of allowing GPD to go out and recruit some additional cycles.
If GPD, from what I understood on what the chief had put out, I guess some memorandums to curtail the overtime. So if the department continues on that track on watching its overtime, so hopefully we don't go over the 1.5 that we're given, which is the only amount that we have at this point. So just crossing our fingers that we do stay on that track. And I'm not sure what other plans the chief has regarding the overtime.
I have. I'm sorry that Colonel Sayama right now is in military leave, but he's been tasked because the investigations bureau and the operations bureau, where most of the bulk of the overtime from the different patrol precincts and the different other investigative units. We reviewed that overtime plan. I know that there were a lot of points I considered in some of the that was from the last overtime, from the last oversight hearing, and we're working, to come up with overtime management policy, and then at the same time looking at several of the particular points in this overtime plan that was provided to the legislature is being modified. And actually, we've now just empowered each of the commanders. I met with the precinct commanders, with the police commander, Suyama, and we made it clear that this original overplan that was sent out, there were some, issues there. And I think a majority of the precinct commanders, to include all the other sections, have understood that it wasn't practical in some of those issues. So I think they've gone back, and I think the commander will be giving me a progress report after completing this overtime management policy about what we've done. And I think it's just sent that message out that money doesn't grow on trees. That if you're going to actually work, you got to just make sure, without compromising security, that the overtime is justified when they're actually responding in emergency. There's exigent circumstances for emergency, so we don't want to compromise the security. Of the
Chief, so when do you anticipate any modification to your policy?
I believe this week, when the colonel returns back from his military leave. He's just only away for 2 days, but when he comes back, I'll probably get the full report on the completion of his input and report, because we've been getting input from commands and ideas about the same sort of considerations that the senators said in the last oversight hearing.
So after you receive feedback from the commander, then you'll be modifying your policy?
Yeah.
And then once you modify the policy, your timeline is possibly the end of next week, or?
Probably the end of this week for the a new overtime plan, that's modified, and at the same time, by next week, they'll have actually a policy, a general order that's entitled overtime management.
So please, if we can get a copy of that modified policy once it's adopted. So by the end of next week, hopefully you'll be able to have that reviewed and finalized and updated. Okay. And then anything that you need from Chief, any assistance that you will need from the legislative body at this point in time?
No, I won't need any assistance from them.
Okay. Okay, any other questions or comments from the panel? Vice Speaker Cruz?
First, I want to thank the Chief for gracefully withdrawing that overtime policy, because, as I said the last time, I knew that it contradicted your general orders. We won't need to go through it, thankfully. What I am concerned about is that you mentioned 2 divisions as being the major spenders of overtime. You did not mention executive security, which is directly under the Chief's office, if I understand. Since my last FOIA, how have we managed to keep executive security within reason?
I believe, Captain Castro, my special assistant, I think he's here in the audience. We've been given the marching orders to cut executive security, in their overtime by 20%. I think we're making headway in that. I think a lot of the executive security officers, hardworking, they have a thankless mission, but they've been able to adjust their schedules without compromising security of the first family and the second family, but actually making sure that they reduce their overtime. So I will probably get a report, but I'm confident that it's low, that their overtime expenditures are lower than previously. That you don't have any individual working encumbering $50,000 in overtime.
I'm very fast in FOIA, so rather than my FOIA, can you just provide the information of the expenditures in executive security for the last 2 months of the chairman in the next report?
Okay.
You guys have managed to beat me to the ground. I'm too tired.
Thank you very much, Vice Speaker Cruz. Senator San Nicolas?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief, I know that there's always issues that we always try to manage, and it's no different with any other organization. But today, I just want to say thank you so much. I want to say thank you for the hard work that you put in to finally closing the books on this retro payment. For me, it was always a monkey on my back, and I've just been here for a short while compared to you. And you've seen it all the way to completion. And I think that that's something for all of us to be thankful for. I'd like to echo your thanks to the governor for helping us to close the books on this. I'd like to thank the chairman also for these hearings as well that have helped this process along. But I mean, for me, this is it's a load off my chest. I can actually breathe a little easier, knowing that we're going to be able to finally say that all of our law enforcement, including the police department, is getting their just due. So today, in spite of all the other issues, and of course those don't go away, but I just want to say thank you. You know, take the family out to dinner. It's definitely something to celebrate today. So thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you, Senator Nicholas.
Thank you, Senator Nicholas. Chief, just as we wrap up today's oversight hearing deliverables, and what I would do, Chief, in regards to, with the exception of the report that you committed to providing with the $1.9 million breakdown and that particular financial data by the close of this week. With that exception, I will request that the committee receive responses by the 25th of May on these deliverable items, okay? The first is there was an inquiry or a question made with regards to mechanical engineering, the involvement and participation of the crime lab. A request of the report. I would hope that the report will be submitted much sooner. There has been a request by the committee for a copy of your biweekly report. Also, the retirement fund question on the 30% remittance as it applies to the retro pay. If in fact that is part of the overall compensation to our law enforcement community, that in addition to the 6.4, is that inclusive of the 30% for our retirement fund? We do need clarification on that. And then there was also, I hope someone is taking a list. Lieutenant Kidaway, it looks like you're writing some things down. Okay, the financial breakdown with regards to the cops, that's the $1.9 million, all the recruitment. I know the Vice Speaker had extended that request to include an entire breakdown of the number of uniformed personnel on October 1st, the beginning of the fiscal year, and then how many uniformed individuals or police officers have retired since then, and then how many additional individuals have been brought in, either POTs or brought back in as a reemployment as it applies to the entire budget breakdown. And that particular report actually is due on Friday. The additional deliverable, Chief, is just an inquiry to GCC. First of all, there was a request by Vice Speaker Cruz on the GCC memorandum to conduct training, if we could get a copy of that particular agreement. And then obviously the suggestion or the request that communication be made with GCC personnel to see if by any chance a cycle can commence prior to the conclusion of this FY rather than the beginning of next FY, October 1st, should additional funding be identified by the Vice Speaker, who's the Chair of Appropriations, rightfully so. And then the overtime management policy, Chief, I know that you said by the close of next week, your office should be able to have a refined, updated policy. And incidentally, on the overtime, thank you very much for keeping an open mind as it applies to the overtime, because having visited a number of your troops, one of the biggest concerns is when you have a beat that is 113 and 114 in a 117 cycle beat assignment, and that is a shift supervisor and office manager, as well as individuals out in the streets for any particular police precinct. I think that certainly there are some questions to be raised as to whether in fact we have enough uniformed police officers reinforcing the presence of your men and women out there in the field. So certainly I appreciate you keeping an open mind in regards to reworking the overtime policy so that we continue to not only ensure the safety of our community, but most importantly ensure the safety of our men and women in uniform as they patrol and provide that service to our community. The additional deliverable that is being requested is a copy of the expenses for this fiscal year of the overtime for the executive security. Okay, so those are all the deliverables that have been requested, and I think most importantly what was just mentioned by a previous speaker is, Chief, on the issue of the retro payment. Thank you for working aggressively with the governor's office and with your fellow law enforcement directors and chiefs in terms of finally putting a closure to that particular obligation that is due by the government of Guam. We know that it's never easy to find $6.4 million all-inclusive, in addition to the $2 million that is, or inclusive of the $2 million that due to GPD. But for the governor's office to lean forward and work with yourself as well as the other law enforcement directors and chiefs, I certainly appreciate on behalf of the members of the committee being able to work that aggressively and at least give us a more definitive daylight in terms of when that will be paid. One additional request or one additional item, senators, is Captain Fisher would like to provide some comments. Captain Fish, can you join us up front, please? Please identify yourself for the record and proceed with any comments.
My name is Captain Eric Fisher, Guam Police Department. I'd like to thank you, Senators, Chair, for allowing me to express my comment. I'm not here to answer any questions because that's going to be up for the Chief. Over the years, I've expressed my concern. We're losing officers. We're talking about officers at the bottom, bringing them in. But we haven't talked about promotions. We got officers out there in the street right now, PO2s, PO3s, that haven't been promoted. We have our females. They haven't been promoted. Most of us at the top echelon right now, we're retiring. Who are you going to have left in this department? I'm retiring. You got other captains that are retiring. We have one major. We used to have 7. Who are you going to have left? Okay? We need to do something to fix this. The Chief is trying to do his best. Okay? He's my psycho mate. And I support him. But we need to do something to fix this department. Because we're all leaving. You got officers now going over to retirement fund right now. They're leaving the department. So we're talking about bringing officers in. That's fine. But you got officers checking out. So what good is it? We're going to bring officers in? We've got seasoned officers that are ready to check out. You've got captains ready to retire. How many captains do we have?
We have about 9 captains.
How many have told you they're going to retire?
We have about 3 contemplating retirement.
How many lieutenants do we have? And they haven't been.
Probably have 12 lieutenants right now.
Okay? So we need to promote. We need money in order to promote people. I care about this island. I've served in this department for over 30 years. I'm ready to check out in July. 32 years active service. Who's going to be left behind? I care about all of your families. I'm out there every single night, every single day, on the weekends. I don't even sleep. But we have to do something. We got to do something to fix it. We got to promote. We got to promote our females. We got to promote the officers that's been out there as acting, PO2s, PO1s. Let me tell you what I recently did, right? I gave up a cush position over at Forensic Science Division. And I asked the chief, when Major Rick retired, I said, let me take on Operations Bureau. Scott Wade, sitting back there. He said, why would you do that? Why would you want to take on a task that way? And I put my wife through a lot of hardship. But I said, let me fix what needs to be broken. I mean, what was broken? Let me try and fix it. And I got to about 90%, it's done. Okay? You can go from agate to Tamuni, Haganya, and Dededo, and you're going to be treated the same. Your families will be treated the same. Okay? Because I fixed it. We need help in our department. Okay? One man can't do it alone. The chief can't do it alone. I commend him for what he's been able to do, but we can't do it alone. And the infighting that continues to go on in our department is just taking a big stress on a lot of people. They want to leave. They're tired of it. Excuse me. They're tired of it. You have to excuse me. We have to fix what's broken. Thank you. Okay? I got a good brothers, right? Ovi. She's been the only ASO in our department. You think that she can handle all the stuff that we need? And let me tell you, when I was up at Forensic Science Division, I had one vehicle, okay, that the government bought. I was privileged to be brought on by a certain person that told me about a program. It's called a 1033 program. And I recently had a meeting with the governor. And the governor never knew. I got awarded a plaque for government of Guam, $12 million. Since 2009, $12 million in acquisitional cost. Vehicles, generators, Humvees. You go to these agencies and you see this. You go up to the crime lab right now, there's 8 vehicles up there. Okay? $18 million now. I did it myself. I worked on it. Okay? So, only thing, I just wanted to just make a statement that the chief has to toe the line, and all due respect, and Governor, I know you're listening, and I know your chief of staff is listening, Lieutenant Governor. Okay? All due proper respect, sir, to you guys. And I know the chief has to toe the line. But you know what? When you ask, do you need money? How many times have a department gone through an oversight hearing? This is the 4th one. The men and women can't endure this. There's got to be a fix. There's got to be a fix. We can't continue to endure this. We have hardships in our lives. When I was up at FSD, I had one girl that had to quit for her family. It took me 6 months to bring her back on. And she's back to work now. It's not easy, I'm telling you. I'm sitting before you. I'm a captain. I'm sitting before you. People are asking me to stay in the department. They're asking me to continue. I have a wife right now that's probably going to be sitting out there because she told me not to make a scene. And I'm not making a scene. But at the same time, I'm letting you know, many men and women in our department are going through a lot of stress, and a lot of us have PTSD. Okay? And that's the last thing you want, is a cop out there in the street that's not making the right decisions. That's the last thing you want. So I just wanted to make that statement before you and let you know. We need relief. We need relief. When I first joined the department, we used to have cycles back to back. And I know the chief can't ask you for this. Okay? Because he has the total line. But there's got to be something that has to be done. We need cycles back to back. These men and women that are in here right now, okay? Why do you think a lot of them didn't show up? Now, I want to thank you for everything that you've done, right? They're happy now. They're getting their retro. And that's why they're not here today. Because I've been pressing the buttons all weekend. Okay? But we need help. That's all I got to say. We just need help. Okay? The chief can't ask for it. You know that. You know that. But I can say it. Okay? Because I'm ready to retire. I'm ready to check out right now. I already said I'm retiring. I made my announcement. I'm retiring in July. I've relinquished the program, $18 million. I've relinquished the program. I had 2 guys in from Battle Creek, Michigan, in suit and tie, and we met with the governor. He never knew. He never knew what we were doing. And partly, you know, maybe it's my fault because I don't have the avenue in order to reach people. The chief knows. We just need your help. We need your help. Okay? However you can help. We need your help. Okay? I don't know what it's going to take, but we need your help. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Fisher, for the courage it's taken for you to share your perspective and for your wonderful service to the people of Guam over the course of the last 30 plus years. You know, it's all about the unsung heroes out there, the men and women in our law enforcement community, and we understand exactly the challenges you go through. And that's why we're here. Captain Fisher, you mentioned that this is the 4th oversight hearing. We're discussing some of the progress and the activities that the chief has been able to make happen over the course of the last 3 months. And it's understanding that if there's any need for assistance, now is the time to ask for it. Because we are not only in a public forum, but our people are watching. And when we talk about this fiscal year, asking for additional support, the governor asked for an additional $4.5 million for GPD in fiscal year 15's budget. That was granted. The vacancy pool, which was approximately $6 million, was established specifically to support our law enforcement recruitment, of which you just heard earlier that $1.9 million has been pulled from that particular pool to reinforce the support for GPD. And so we need to know. We understand the challenges, Chief, the promotions, and that's another issue that perhaps will be brought up in the future in terms of being able to allow for promotions from PO2 and PO3s and give your men and women that opportunity to be able to move up in rank and assume additional responsibilities. That's an issue.
Yes.
But Captain Fisher, is as part of your, I guess, your statements, I really appreciate you bringing some of these concerns to the attention of the committee. And Chief, unless you have any final comments you would like to share, we can conclude this discussion.
Thank you again for giving me the opportunity to be here to provide a report on the issues. Again, Captain Fisher, you heard him, present his concerns, and I know the legislature, I know that every one of you are going to be looking forward probably for the next oversight hearing where we can probably address some of those issues too and have a status report on the number of individuals actually leaving the department, our retention efforts and our recruitment efforts and our promotion efforts that will be provided.
Thank you very much, Chief, and thank you again for your patience and your understanding in terms of being able to appear before the committee on a repeated basis over the course of the last 4 months. And the intent is obviously not only to understand what the department is going through, but also to realize some progress that you have been able to implement over the course of the last few months. There's no set date at this point in time. Like I said, the deliverables are provided by the 25th of May. Then we would withhold any additional oversight hearings unless you hear otherwise from the committee. So thank you very much again, Chief, and thank you, Captain Fisher, and thank you, Senators, for your participation.